Today I'm going to be talking about an RV accessory that every RVer needs. Well, just about every RVer. And this applies to whether you've got a $1 million Class A motor coach or even an entry-level travel trailer. This accessory that I'm thinking about can even directly impact you and your family's health and well-being while you're out camping. Any guesses? Yes, you guessed it, an RV drinking water hose. Now, I realize this is an incredibly personal decision. You know, everybody has their favorite water hose. Some RVers are constantly buying a new water hose every season in search of the world's best drinking water hose. And then you've got others that, let's just face it, they are a bunch of hose snobs. You know what I'm talking about. They think no hose is good enough, and basically they're in search of the impossible. Well, I found myself in need of a new RV water hose about 18 months ago when I sold my previous fifth wheel and bought this Jayco Pinnacle here. And it just so happened that my favorite RV water hose was out of stock everywhere. I guess it was due to COVID shortages and whatnot. And so it left me searching for a replacement. So I did what any sane, reasonable person would do, and I bought 6 different top-rated RV drinking water hoses. And then, of course, I did a full detailed comparison and inspection on all of them at the same time. Now, if you didn't catch that previous video that I published it was about 18 months ago, I'll put a card up above and a link in the description below. But after seeing and comparing all of those hoses, you know, side by side, I settled on one hose in particular from a company that, quite frankly, I really wasn't that familiar with. I really hadn't heard a lot of chatter about it in the RV community. And that hose, of course, is this Kohree RV water hose. Now, I picked this hose originally because it felt like the most flexible among the bunch that I tested. I mean, it seemed to resist kinking the most, especially at colder temperatures. And this is hard to describe in the video, but it just has a really nice feel to it in my hands as I bent it, you know, around in different directions and such. And, you know, this outer jacket, I mean, just has a really high quality appeal to it. And so I've actually been using this very hose for the last 18 months, and it's worked flawlessly for me. I've become a big fan of it. Well, Kohree reached out to me a while back. You know, I guess they saw my previous hose comparison video, and they asked if I'd be interested in doing a collaboration. So I figured, well, sure, why not? I mean, especially after I've been using their hose for the last 18 months and have been a satisfied customer of it, right? So they offered to send me an identical sample hose, just like the one over here that I bought 18 months ago, to do a review. But in today's video, I'm actually going to do the review on the hose that I've been using for the last 18 months. You know, as far as I know, these hoses are identical except for the age, of course. And I figured it'd be more helpful for prospective buyers to see the review completed on the hose that I've been actually using for 18 months. You're definitely going to want to stick around to the end of the video because I'm going to put this hose through an extreme pressure test to the point of failure, and then I'm going to cut it open and see what it looks like inside. I mean, you know, sometimes hoses that you use for camping, they get kind of moldy inside over time. And, you know, being that this is a hose that you might be drinking out of ultimately or showering, you know, I just want to make sure that this hose has held up well over the last 18 months. So definitely stick around to the end of the video for that. But before we do all that extreme and destructive stuff, let me do a kind of a quick overview of the Kohree hose. I'll give you some close-ups and really just, I want to reiterate why I chose this hose in the first place. You know, basically share my likes and dislikes essentially. So first up, what really sold me on this hose is, again, this premium outer jacket itself. I mean, it's got a very soft premium feel. There's no kinking. It doesn't appear to have a memory, especially after being coiled up. And I'm telling you, if you just start holding this hose in person, you know, flexing it in different directions and such, it's got just a very premium feel to it, and that's really what caught my attention on this hose initially. Now, of course, like all RV drinking water hoses, it is safe for drinking water, obviously, and different hose brands are going to advertise different certifications. But the Kohree hose specifically meets the CA65 certification, which, by the way, if you don't know what CA65 is, let me enlighten you. So the CA65 certification stands for the California Proposition 65, also known as the Safe Drinking Water and Toxic Enforcement Act of 1986. That's right. So it's basically a law in the state of California that requires businesses to provide warnings about significant exposure to chemicals that cause cancer, birth defects, or other reproductive harm, and it prohibits businesses from knowingly discharging significant amounts of listed chemicals, there's over 900 of them by the way, into sources of drinking water, including drinking water hoses. So that means, of course, it's lead-free, BPA-free, and so forth. Now, let's face it, that's a lot of big words, and I don't understand all the ins and outs of that, but I figure if it is good enough for Californians, I mean, if it is approved for folks living in the great state of California to drink out of, then surely it's good enough for the rest of us. I mean, it's almost like eating one of those delicious grass-fed, free-range, non-GMO, gluten-free burgers. Well, all jokes aside, the drinking water certification is a given, of course, but it is still something to like in the end. And I'll just add that I have never tasted anything odd, no funny odors or anything out of this hose over the last 18 months. Now, I also like that the ends of the hose are aluminum here. There's no zinc or no fake colored, brass fittings on the end. It's just straight up aluminum. I have not had any issues with oxidation on the end. Speaking of which, the end that you connect to your campsite, the hydrant, it's got this nice plastic grip, kind of like a wrench almost, that you can use to connect to the spigot. Now, of course, you can see that I've got these brass quick connects that I put on either end, and that's just my personal preference. But it is still nice to have this grip, to hold on to. It just slides over the end of the hose like this. And on the other end, this is the part that hooks up to your RV actually in your wet bay. It's got kind of this siliconized grip there that kind of protects it and keeps it from bending too much. Last, I'll point out is the color of the hose. Some RV accessories, they use these crazy bright fluorescent oranges or fluorescent greens, and for me personally, I'm a big fan of the basic primary colors, and so I actually like that they picked a nice solid blue for the hose. It's kind of a sky blue. It's bright enough that it won't be a trip hazard at your campsite, but it's not so bright that it kind of sticks out like an eyesore. And I mean, it's drinking water hose, so why not make it blue, right? I mean, it just seems like the logical color for a drinking water hose. All right, well, those are my likes. Now let me hit on just a couple dislikes on the Kohree water hose. And the first one is, like I said before, I do like this grip that they put on the end. It's kind of like a built-in wrench to get it tight. But I don't like, and this is maybe being just a little bit picky, but I think this grip could be shaped just a little bit more ergonomically. Maybe have a little bit more of a bulge here in the center instead of just being straight. Especially for us guys with big hands, it'd just be a little bit more comfortable to grip, I think, if it had a bit of a bulge there. So again, me being a little bit picky. And then second dislike is, I really think I'd like to have a similar grip like this one on both ends of the hose. I mean, it does have sort of a nice sleeve on the opposite end here, but I'd rather have that same nice grip on both ends of the hose. So anyway, those are my two dislikes, but let's get on to the torture testing and the durability. I think this is going to be the fun part of the video. So first thing I've done here is tied a knot to demonstrate just how soft and flexible the hose is. So I've got a super tight knot here. And a lot of hoses have a bit of a memory, meaning once they're creased, whether it's a knot or a crease from being coiled up, a lot of them retain that crease almost indefinitely, and it becomes almost like a bottleneck or kink in the hose when you go to use it. So let's undo the Kohree here, and I mean, check this out. Check out how there's not even the slightest bit of a crease or a kink or anything. I mean, it's like it never happened. So this is just a very soft and flexible, high quality compound on the outside of this hose. Next test is we're going to drag and kind of rough it up on the concrete here to test the durability of this outer jacket. I mean, sometimes a pro, this being so soft on the outside, could become a con if it's not durable. And so what I've got here is just standard concrete with a broom finish for grip. And so I'm going to rub the hose, press down real hard and rub the hose against the concrete here. It's super rough, kind of like sandpaper. I don't think anyone would actually do this to their RV water hose, but maybe it happens, accidentally here and there at a campsite. So really, I think this is demonstrating more of an accelerated test over the lifetime of the hose. I mean, we can see now that it did get a little bit roughed up here. It hasn't gone through the outer jacket or torn it or anything like that. I mean, it hasn't compromised the hose in any way. And now for the really fun part, this next test is going to be more of a torture test, where I'm going to pressurize the hose and see just how much pressure it can handle before the hose or the fittings on either side start to leak. Because after all, I'm thinking, you know, some campsites, they may have ridiculously high water pressure. You know, for me personally, I don't think I've ever encountered one over 120 PSI, but I've heard about others that have alleged they've seen 150, maybe even up to 200 PSI at different times at campsites. And, you know, the last thing you'd want is for your hose to fail, especially where it connects inside your wet bed. You'd have a real mess there, especially if you weren't around. Now, Kohree says that the hose is rated for up to 150 PSI, which, by the way, most of us are going to have a PRV, you know, pressure reducing valve on the campsite hydrant, and they actually make one too. They sent me this one here. It looks like a really nice model that you can adjust here with a gauge and everything. So I'll put a link in the description below for this one. But most of us are going to have that PRV, which is going to limit that pressure going through the hose. But I mean, what if you forget to hook up your PRV? What if it's malfunctioning? What if for whatever reason you just have a burst of pressure that comes through that hose? We want to make sure that hose can really handle the pressure that it's rated for. So let's find out just how strong this hose actually is. Now, to do this, first I'm going to put a little bit of soap inside either end of the hose here. And this is, by the way, one of my favorites, called Looking Sharp. And then what we're going to do is screw on this right here, which is going to be a standard quick connect for an air compressor. And I'll go ahead and get that tightened here in just a minute. And then on the opposite end here, I've got a pressure gauge. So I'm going to get all this cinched up, and then I'm going to come back and spray the outer part right here with some more Dawn dish soap, and that way if it does start to leak, we'll start seeing bubbles, and that'll kind of give indication. Now, the compressor that I'm going to hook this up to, the air compressor, it has a max rating right at 150 PSI, and so I don't know if we're going to actually make this fail because this is rated for 150 PSI, but I figure might as well go to the max. And the other thing I'm not sure about is this is actually a water pressure gauge, but I think it can still measure just air pressure because, you know, we're pressurizing it with air and not water. So hopefully if everything works, we'll see just how strong this hose actually is. All right, so I think I got everything cinched up pretty tight. And so what I'm gonna do is, let me turn this so you can see the pressure gauge a little bit better here. And what I'm gonna do is hook up the other end here to the air compressor end that's fully pressurized, like I said, max 150 PSI. And then we're gonna try to watch this gauge. I'm gonna put this in a little better position so we can all see it here. Hang on just a second. All right, so I think that's set up a little bit better so we can see everything. I've got the dial reset here. This little red needle is gonna tell us just how high it goes if it were to lose pressure. It's kind of like a memory there. So that's reset to 0. And I'm gonna go ahead and plug this in. I've never done this before. And like I said, my compressor is one of those smaller pancake ones, so it only goes up to 150 to begin with. So I don't know how high we're gonna be able to go, but let's go ahead and give it a run. Here we go. All right, we got up to 60, 80, we've got 100, 110, and we're starting to slow down. Ooh, yeah, it looks like right around maybe 115. So I imagine there's some pressure loss with the hose. I've got a pretty long hose running out here. It is climbing just a little bit. We're almost up to 120 PSI. So I don't know that this is really a challenge for the hose, you know, because it's rated for 150 PSI to begin with. But I am not seeing any bubbles whatsoever, not even the slightest bubbles. And I put quite a bit of soap on there and then sprayed the outside again. So at least we know, let's just round up a little bit and say if you're up to 120 PSI, you're gonna have no issues whatsoever on this hose. I'm gonna let it sit though here for a few minutes and just see if by chance we detect any bubbles. So it's been sitting now for several minutes untouched, and I don't see any bubbles yet, but I'm going to spray it with some more fresh dish soap here. In fact, let's undo this just a little bit so we can see right up in there, and then we'll go ahead and hit this end as well. Whoops. Just bumped the little memory marker here. My hands are so slippery. Yeah, so I don't see any bubbles, not even the slightest bubbles here, and you can see it has been hovering right there under, it picked up just a little bit, but right under 120 PSI. So I'm kind of bummed because I was really hoping I could go higher, closer to 150 PSI, but my compressor just isn't, you know, powerful enough to output that apparently. Really would have been fun, I think, to go up to 200 and beyond and just see at what point does the hose actually, you know, start leaking, at what point does it actually fail. But you know, 120 PSI, that's still pretty high pressure. Like I said, I don't think I've ever seen a campsite myself personally over 120, and even then it was one that I can think of that comes to mind. Most campsites are going to be closer in that 60 to 80 at the max there. So that's pretty impressive. Let's go ahead and undo it and just see how much pressure was built up in there. Here we go. Yeah, you can just feel all that air pressure coming out. So that's really impressive. I mean, it gives me the confidence that the way they've terminated the hose ends on both sides, that it really is rated and it's going to hold up. Now for the last part of the test, I'm going to cut open some sections of the hose, because remember, this hose has been in use for about 18 months. And I'm kind of curious what it looks like inside. I mean, is there going to be any mold inside, you know, any discolorations? And so let me carefully cut open some sections. I'm going to do a section here close to the end, and then another section in the middle of the hose, and we'll just take a look inside the hose. All right, so we'll take a look here at the end. This will be the end that connects to your campsite spigot, and I'll just show you that real quickly. It looks pretty clean, but you can see the different layers of the hose. It looks like it's got that outer jacket, of course, the blue, and then a white inner jacket there. But let's go ahead and take the section that I opened here, that I cut open, and see, wow, it looks really clean. So this would be the part that connected to the hydrant closest at the campsite. And I'm really surprised. I thought I would see a little bit of discoloration. You know, sometimes galvanized pipes have some iron in them at campsites, but this looks really clean. I mean, I am really surprised looking in here. I don't see any discoloration whatsoever. I see kind of the webbing, whatever's inside the hose. You can kind of see it there. That's kind of supporting that inner layer. Let's take a look though at this inner section. This would be more toward the middle of the hose, and see what that looks like too. And that looks really good too. I don't see any discoloration whatsoever. I'm feeling a lot of soap got in here. But again, I mean, it looks really clean. So that gives me a lot of confidence, because, you know, over 18 months of use, not having any mold or any discoloration whatsoever, that gives me a lot of peace of mind, because remember, you're probably drinking out of this hose essentially, taking showers out of this hose essentially. So the fact that it's all nice and clean and white in there, I mean, I've never cleaned the hose, I've never put any Clorox down the hose, never treated it with anything. I've just plugged it straight into the campsite spigot. In fact, my water filtration system is actually after the hose inside the wet bay. And so, I mean, this is just unfiltered raw water from the campsite, and it looks really good. Well, folks, I'm really glad to be able to conclude, after seeing all these tests firsthand, this is still going to be my go-to water hose for my RV. Speaking of which, I forgot to mention another like on this hose is the price. Actually, it's not ridiculously expensive. I mean, typically you can pick up a 25 footer. That's what I've got here, 25 footer for under $30 shipped. In fact, I'll include affiliate links in the description below to all three of the different hoses. They've got a 15 foot, a 25 foot, 50-foot lengths, and so you can get the one that, you know, makes the most sense for your case. I personally like this 25-footer here. That's kind of a nice length where, you know, you're going to have enough hose to connect to about 95% of the campsites that you go to, or at least the ones I go to, but yet you don't have so much surplus hose, you know, just laying out at your campsite. And then you might want to buy maybe a backup 15-footer on hand if you've got a longer, you know, stretch that you need to run to. And then I'll also put a link to this nice PRV that Kohree makes. I didn't give you a lot of details on this, but it looks like a really well-made PRV that you could put right on the hydrant, and you just pull up basically on here and adjust the pressure if you want to change it there. So that's a really nice design. It looks like it's real robust and would hold up over time. So again, I'll put those links in the description below, and I appreciate you using those to support the channel. But in any case, I hope you found this video helpful. A special thanks to Kohree again for providing me with this hose and the PRV for this video. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to review the product, especially after using it, you know, for the last 18 months. And if you like trucks and RVs, be sure to subscribe to my channel. As always, thanks for watching.